So shall we start now? I think other people, they may join and in the due course. So on behalf of IGDTOW Anveshan Foundation, I, Dr. V.K. Arora, welcome you all in the online sessions, mentorship session series number 7, in which our first speaker is Arun Sharma ji and second speaker Geetika Dayal. You all must be knowing about Indira Gandhi Delhi Technical University for Women. But then too, I give you a brief glimpse about our university. Our university is a women university, which is a government technical university and only university in India of such kind. We are having incubation center as a Section 8 company. The name of incubation center is the same one, Anveshan Foundation. In our board of directors, senior faculty members of IGDTOW, they are involved. Till now, we have selected 4 different batches of our incubatees, in which in total we are having total 15 incubatees, and all are women enterprises. All are started by women entrepreneurs, and the majority of the stakeholders are also with the women entrepreneur only. We have also got DST recognition as TBI, and we are also expecting the grant of TBI very soon from DST. Apart from that, many of the pre-incubation facilities and training programs, we are conducting it in collaboration of GIZ, Germany. And this series is also a part of the contract order which we have received from GIZ, Germany. Our next batch advertisement is already flashed in our website. You can go through with the website of Anveshan Foundation, which is anveshanfoundation.org. In your universities and colleges also, if you want to conduct such kind of program in association with Anveshan Foundation, you can always contact me or the deputy manager on my behalf. So our first session, we are going to have interaction with Mr. Arun Sharma ji. Arun Sharma ji is MBA from Cranfield School of Management, London. Right now, presently, he is working as an executive director with KPMG Gurgaon. Prior to that, for 8 years, he was with Accenture Group. I hope his session will be very useful for both, for the startups promoter and for the faculty members also. And the topic of his session, that is significance of transformation leadership for startups and the role of startup management. You all must be knowing that after 1980 worldwide, the leadership turned around from the transactional leadership to the transformation leadership, where we actually try to convert our employees in best according to our working style, so that they can also get a flair and they can also feel something like they are a part of a startup company. In this, first of all, you will be starting from the goal, what the goal you are having, very defined goal, what the goals, because as you all know, mission and objective both are actually a part of goal with a different time frame of 5 years and 1 year. After that, he will be talking about planning the strategy, and then after executing about the strategy, in which number of realms he will be covering. I hope it will be beneficial for all of you. Sir, it is my pleasure to invite you as a speaker and expert for our this mentorship session series number 7. Welcome, sir.
No, my pleasure. I'm really happy to be here today, and happy to interact with everyone. And I'll share along why did I agree to join and talk about it in a while. And as we all understand, it's like now 6 months running where we all getting used to this, watching everyone virtually and trying to coordinate with each other. So please bear if there's a glitch with the technology. I believe it should not happen, but in case it happens, and at any point of time, if you feel we are going off track and want to intervene and have a question, happy to have a deliberation or discussion, because as one first thing we tell everyone in consulting, everything is right and everything is wrong, right? It's just about the perception that you carry. So but I intend to share today, and that's where I kind of term this as more about my thoughts and experiences, right? And but Professor Arora and I have been kind of deliberating for a while, is that I don't intend to share any theories and any framework, because I believe everything that you get from your colleges, right? So when you are doing the interaction with the industry and with somebody, whosoever it may be, and it's my perspective here, considering all of us have been on the other side, being a student, right? It's important to hear the practical experiences, because theories are being taught by the learned professor, and let it be coming from them. So I'll try to share my insights largely from the outside and experience, and we'll take from there. So why, before I get into it, right, I think, when you talk about transformation, right, and, if people are willing to type their inputs in the chat window, perfect. If they want to kind of, come and talk through here, unmute themselves and talk about it, even it is better. But I would say both ways, it's important that, please participate. At times I will ask about questions, but, like for example, there is a question from Nishal. Will I be sharing my slides? Yeah, the slides are already with Professor Arora, and he could share with all the participants as he feels like, for sure. Now, first and foremost, right, I think, as, Prof talked about already about transformation, right? But I think, when we talk about transformation, and in my mind, this is the first example that get to me, right? And I'm sure many of you would have seen this or rather read about it. But I think, it's quite fascinating to understand how butterfly, which is possibly one of the most beautiful creature on this planet, how it comes into existence. And the whole theory, whole study, whole evolution itself is quite remarkable, right? From the eggshell, then becoming the caterpillar. The caterpillar job is just to eat, and even it eats the leaf on which it grows, right? So eggs are on leaf, the caterpillar comes out, caterpillar actually eats the leaf. And then it forms a pupa, and from the pupa you have the butterfly, the wings are formed. So what we're talking about here, the whole evolution, right? When we say transformation or a metamorphosis in this particular construct, right, it's changing something very fundamental, right? So yes, while we are doing certain activity, while we are studying, while we are observing, there are many ways in which we learn. There's always bit of learning that happens. There's always step change that is coming in. But when I talk about transformation and when we think about transformation, it is much, much more than that. It is having a very fundamental differences in terms of the evolution. It is very fundamental terms in terms of how we start thinking, how we start observing. And, that's the premise I have thought through while I kind of compile some of the thoughts for this session. And again, one of the other thing which I would like to, as I mentioned again, I reiterate, any point of time, anyone has a point to share and a deliberation to make, let's get into that. I've been assigned to talk to around 45 to 50 minutes, which will take us till 4, but happy to have a deliberation after that. And, that's how the time is. I think the next speaker is at 4:30. So we'll try to wrap up around 20 past 4. Now, moving on from here, when Professor asked me to be here, right, like I think it's very important for me to share with everyone why I decided to be here, right? So first and foremost, as my day job, I'm a executive director, equivalent of, if people understand the partnership model of consulting firm, model of as a partner in KPMG, right? As part of my job, a lot of work is involved in coaching and mentoring to the leaders, right? So some of the marquee names where I've worked are Bosch Automotive or HSBC, Society Generale, some of the large government organizations, urban development, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, starting some projects with Ministry of, Road and Transport now, or a Defense Ministry. So all that comes in together. But what I kind of do for my living is advising clients on transformation. And considering the consulting world, you could imagine, I get reasonably paid for it. Or at least my firm gets reasonably paid for the kind of services I bring to the table. The other thing I also want to bring in here, which I would say is very, very important in today's startup model, especially everything is being digital and, everything, the whole power of India. I bring in a lot of experience of studying and working abroad. So of my close to 20-year experience, I have around 10 to 12 years where I have studied and lived abroad, which brings in that rich experience and nuances on how the world could operate, right? Again, in that my constraint, that is my experience, but happy to share in from my perspective. The second thing which I want to share, working with startup is my personal passion, right? So when Prof asked me about being involved here, a lot of time I spend, especially on my weekend, is talking to a few of my friends on startups, right? Now, these could be helping them in anything specific. So right from when they were building the new idea to the stage where they are today, I have been involved actively in few of them. I have made a few investment as well. Don't want to call any fancy term as early stage angel investment or whatever you want to put it this way. But yes, I'm someone who dabbles into some early stage investment as well. So not promising that I can do anything, but happy to kind of consider and talk through if there is any good investment proposition. I can kind of interact with that person, talk to my friends circle, and see if we can help somehow. So there's a bit of a learning for me as well. The other thing is that yes, I have had experience of working on a couple of startups, right? Why I would say use the word failed word may not be right. So in my MBA program, I was working with, along with a friend of mine, uh, a particular product, right, which is still working in UK. So we started that in 2010 as part of a business case. Like all the MBA programs typically have entrepreneurship course, and in that you have to make a business model. We made a business model. My friend is still working in UK on that model. I decided to come back to India, and I'm not participating in that actively. So the model is successful, but I as an individual couldn't continue doing on that, right? I think the larger deliberation I had while I was moving to India, I could not start supporting that actively. And that pretty much was designed 10 years back with the UK market. And in that particular product, very simplistically, if you look at, in UK till the age from 0 to 5 years, every kid gets a red book. Every child that is born in UK has a red book, and the red book has each and every information about the child, you know, and that information could be about your school, about your medication history, about your parents. But what we thought was actually digitizing it and keeping your pictures, photos in a very, very, what should I say, secured manner rather than Facebook and all those other media where many parents are not comfortable, and I'm one of them. But so this model is still working. The name is EY Log. My friend runs it even today. He's from the same B school. But yes, I decided not to continue. So that also gives me some experience to kind of be here and say what I could have done differently, right? Now, the third thing is that, which I feel in all interaction, right? And this is my strong, strong belief. I will surely learn today. Like why I'm doing this, because I will learn from this process, right? I see each opportunity as an opportunity to learn, because no matter who we are, opportunity to learn comes to us each and every single day, right? So I'm very happy to be participating here and being part of this forum. At the same time, just to kind of add a little bit of perspective here, yes, I have been, I was just interacting with, Professor Rajiv earlier from ITS College, right? So happened to visit them around Feb, do a lot of faculty kind of experience as well with different places. So have had opportunity to be a professor on Accenture Strategy College, where we run the programs in youth student programs in Chicago or in Bangalore from Accenture Strategy. Have had a chance to interact with IIM Ahmedabad team as well, primarily to talk about consulting. And even on Accenture had a program with INSEAD on business strategy discipline, where I was one of the prof on the business strategy topics, right? And one thing which I forgot to include, and that happens quite a lot, maybe the age is catching up, is, there's a program which I was the main architect from work hard, which was on startup mentoring called School of Courage, right? So that program we ran for close to a year from Accenture, and I was one of the architect program where, Professor where Khorakiwala, the promoter, wanted to build a platform where he would encourage the advice to the startups, but the startups have to be social enterprises, right? They need not be your e-commerce, they need not be your ed tech, which will only make money tomorrow. Because you was many people who work in the social sector, they don't get the right mentoring and support, because all the money, all the right fancy thing chase people where the big buck is, right? So have been involved in that. People are free to kind of go and on the chat window, if somebody can go and try looking at School of Courage, and you can type it. it's a program from Wokard. Some of the inputs are still there available, right? So I think in a nutshell, what I'm talking about is very happy to be here. And I think I bring in certain insights based on my professional and personal experience, but in a very, very selfish manner, if I say, I surely going to learn today. And that's why I'm here today. Yeah. So moving on, I think, when we talk about transformation, I think, we mentioned about different stages, right? And I think the question which I always ask people when somebody reaches out to me, and I'm still to have two discussion later today in the evening, is that every time I ask people that, are your goals defined, right? And when I say how well, have you really thought through them? Because a lot of time what happens is, people don't have goals, they have intent, right? And I always tell people, there's a lot of difference between what you really want to do, and if you're not through, how will you get there, right? And I don't want to talk about any of the theory, but there are multiple models available in terms of how you could define goals. People talk about SMART goals, right? Make your goals specific, measurable, achievable, right, and result oriented, and at least timely. It says that very clearly. If I take a very practical example, and that's something I applied on myself, I would say, uh, when I thought about it 4 years back, I have to run half marathon, which is 21 kilometers, right? So how do you plan to run 21 kilometers, right? For 2 weeks, I ran 5 kilometers. For 2 weeks, I did extensive walk, make sure I run 3 to 5 kilometers for 2 weeks. Then I gradually increased from 5 to 7 or 5 to 8. By the 6th week, I was running 10 to 12 very easily, right? I built my stamina around that, did some strength training, and then I started participating around. I did a couple of 10 kilometers run, and in the month 3, I could easily do a half marathon, right? So it's just that so the goal was very clear that I had to run a half marathon in so day, which is running about 21 kilometers, which is more about a personal goal than anything else. But I made sure that I talked to a few people. I took that challenge on myself, became disciplined about it, slept at the right time, woke up at the right time, and I used to travel a lot in those consulting days. Wherever I was traveling, I always carried my shoes with me, did running in the gym or on the open roads either in Mumbai or in Hyderabad or in Chennai, depending on which city I was at. But in short, I kept on running and kept a track with a very simple thing that we all have now is any kind of your digital tag, right, which helps you to understand how you're doing. Thankfully, I did not face any injury, but I could do it. So all I'm just talking about it could be any goal that you have, right? But just become more specific about it, and that is really, really important, right? So when it comes to from an entrepreneur standpoint, and I think always, people ask about you, are your goals well defined? If not, when I'm saying goals, right, a lot of time I see people want to do startup just because their friends are doing, you know, just because it is the cool thing. 10 years back, I remember, many of your fresh week school graduates within my personal network or professional network, they would ask me to just be part of consulting firms, right? Or investment banking. Now I believe startup is the new fad. And the question then always comes in, are you the one who can really take this burn? Are you the one who can really go into it? Right? Mentioned the example of myself, a field startup where I had right strategy in my mind, right? Because my friend is still working on that firm right now, 10 years in UK, not an easy place to survive and maintain your family. Because imagine and it's the person from India only, from Gurgaon, right, where I am also based. But my personal aspiration required me to be back in India. Did I have that tolerance for risk? Possibly no. My target market was UK, not global that time. So I could not sustain that. I had to come back. Maybe the strategy was good. So what we're talking about here is at any point of time is very, very important. And I would definitely spend some time towards the end to talk about it. How do we build these right habits? That's where I feel if I want to give everybody one takeaway today, and I'll try my best to talk through that towards the end, is that how do we build the right habit? There are various examples, various theories around it. One source that I always refer to is an author called James Clear. There's an amazing book from him called Atomic Habits. If people have got a chance to read through it, great. If you can't, even Audible has that available, please read through some of it. Amazing content. And it tells you about how do you build those habits, right? And when you have to build a new habit, you have to think about habit is a form of thinking, form of action, and how do we build those specific nuances in our daily routine, daily practice that we start building any new habit, right? So I think similarly, we are talking about building the business, right? And I'm not going to bore you about talking about the business strategy, and I leave that to profs and many other things. I'll try to stick to this area where we talk about startup, we talk about transformation. And my simple challenge or other question to people, and you can use the chat window about what you need to take off in your mind. Would people have care to respond on the chat or any other window, please? What makes companies successful? Any views, any thoughts? People can talk on the chat or be unmute and share that, please. Any views on that? I'm just trying to see if I can see the chat.
You all can write your views. What do you think? What is the main criteria for your business to be successful? What is the main thing? Is it a good project report, or it's a good business idea, or luck factor, whatever it is, whatever is there in your mind?
Yeah, it's important to hear from people. Yeah, I got the chat window somewhere now. So how do I get there?
So it is self-dedication, then understanding customers' requirement.
Sure, understanding customer requirement, great. Self-dedication, nice. Is the idea in your team members, great. I'm looking for more food culture, amazing. Yeah, few more, and then we can just get to it. Right. I'm still waiting for that. Fantastic, great planning. Okay, nice. Creativity and management. Okay, thank you, Vanchika. There's some Galaxy C9 people. Time investment, interesting. Time investment, very nice. Okay, just one more. Good team. Wow, this is amazing. Good team, quality products, good understanding, fantastic. So thanks for all punting in, right? So I just missed one, which I always listen to people, or whenever we ask the question, there's nothing called money, right? Nobody's saying I need money to be successful, right? Yeah, innovative idea, super, right? Great. So I will just say that this is some research that I picked up, okay, and it kind of becomes very very interesting for people to see. And this is a source, and there's a TED talk available from Bill Gross, and I tried to. Good team, amazing, fantastic, yes. So idea is definitely one thing, right? No two ways about it. Idea is one of the great things that people need to have. Then the second thing was team and execution. Do we have the right team? Do we have the right planning? Then obviously the business model, the product that we all talked about, right? Then people really talk about funding, right? Like how much money I have. If I had money, I would have become successful. But I think one thing which plays a very, very key role is about the timing, right? Is the time right? Okay. And what Bill Gross has done, he has looked into multiple organizations, and you can, if you think about the Indian model, okay, any guesses, if these are the five things, just two or three responses, what do you feel is the most important thing out of the five? If it is idea, I think many of these parts are covered, right? If I affordable, if I about customer needs, it will all fall into business model, right? Team, people have called out, right? Self dedication would also be team part of it. And timing is about when do you really launch it. So I'm just wondering from the team available here, anybody would like to say which is the most? It's anyway got it to the next slide. Sorry, it's. Right. So I think what it came out very interestingly, and I would say, and let's deliberate about when you look into this thing, guys. Okay, and that's where the important part comes in. So two startling things which came to my mind here, right? And that's where I wanted to bring this chat or bring this search to everyone, right? Lot of time we give amazing emphasis to idea or funding. All the people I talk to, that's what they say: idea and funding. But I think the thing that really makes a big difference is timing and team. Okay, and I can share examples, and I tried not to be talking about something generic available in the newspaper. Anybody and everybody could read it, right? But Paytm came into existence much before than demonetization. But when the real tick happened, it was not planned by Vijay Shekhar Sharma. Isn't that correct? Just think about it. Had demonetization not happened, would Paytm be what it is today? Right? So those things also plays a role, right? And somebody would say it's a luck. I'm not challenging that at all. And similarly, I would share this experience of mine. A friend of mine runs a firm called Value Bond. Okay, he does a lot of publishing work. He's an IIT Roorkee grad, and runs a firm which is kind of based out of Bangalore. And he called me once and said, Arun, you advise a lot of corporates. I struggle with one big challenge all the time. And his challenge was the moment he hires 41st employee, the problem starts to multiply. And he's saying the moment I go to above the threshold of 50, my attrition becomes quite high. Okay, that's the problem statement he told me. So I told him, okay, Neeraj, let's spend a couple of hours together to try to get to the details of it. And, what I could really gather from Neeraj at that time is he's someone who is very passionate about this firm. No two ways about it, running this firm, has a reasonable amount of book of business, making good profit for himself, doing good for his investors, family, and everyone. But I think one thing that he was getting wrong there, and which I could figure out, that why this threshold of 35 to 40, beyond that he was having a challenge. The answer was very simple, right? When I sat with him for a couple of hours, or rather 2 3 meetings, what I told him, and I'll just tell you the solution for that. I figured out the diagnosis of that problem was for the good 35 to 40 people. Neeraj made a point to spend 1 hour with almost each of these 35 people every month. Okay, it's quite humongous time investment, but what it does is it made those people feel great. It made those people feel valued. It made those people feel belonging to the whole idea, right? But the moment your team size grows beyond 40, he had to establish a new structure. Maybe he couldn't give that much of a time. Maybe he could give time to number 5, but not to number 41st. Or maybe he's giving time to 41st, but not able to give time number to 5, right? Now, the example is a little bit simplistic, we may feel, but I think when I met Neeraj after 2 years, I told him one very fundamental thing that, Neeraj, think about who are your first 3 4 people who joined you, who made a big difference with you, right? Trust them to take more leadership role. Give them that ownership mindset. Don't make them be just a leader in the firm. For example, today in KPMG, I am one of the leaders, but am I the owner? Answer is no, right? The moment the difference between owner and leader, or owner and a manager, is as simple as, everybody has got, without sounding sexist here, right? When your wife or your spouse, your mother, or anyone who cooks food for you at home, or even a tea, the way it tastes versus when a maid does it, right? Or you eat at a restaurant, are two different things. So the other person is doing it with the purpose of feeding you something which is very, very important for your body, for your mind, that nourishment, right? Whereas, when you buy it, give 20 bucks, give 50 rupees, or give 100 bucks and buy it, that feeling is not there, right? So I kind of told him that how do you really take care of your 2 to 5 employees who will help you to grow the business? And you won't imagine, then after 2 years, I again met Neeraj in person in Bangalore. And he told me, Arun, you saved me my tuition cost like anything. Today I have a team which is 75 plus, right? So all I'm just talking about is you may or may not have that much of command on timing. But one thing which you have always good command on is team and execution, right? Idea business model, you spend a lot of time worrying about, and invariably many people do get it right, in my views, right? But team execution is something where people struggle. And what is the big fundamental thing or takeaway for me is, in this case is, yes, a lot of time we worry about money, but yes, money, no two ways about it, is not important. It's still there, 14%. And, I don't want to do this math for you here, but if you just keep in some of the ideas here, right, and talk about some of the products that we see in India, which have been great today, and why they are not so, which were great 5 years back or 3 years back, they don't exist today. You can easily see it. Yes, there could be failure for a variety of reasons. For example, since Ola came or Uber came, where is Meru taxi services? I presume many of us from Delhi would recall, leveraging Meru, and it was one of my preferred vendor, I would say 5 years back, considering I used to take 2 3 flights minimum per week. Yeah. So then they completely got lost into their business model. Idea was always there, right? People who are traveling, they need a cab. No, idea doesn't change. But in their business model, digital intervention completely got wrong. Or somebody could argue the funding and the timing and the app that got into Uber and Ola was too big for Meru to handle. But again, the question is, Meru never elevated them, right? It would have taken 3 months, 6 months, 1 year for these ideas to come to India. Meru was always in this business. Were they thinking about that in future or not? One of the CEO, whom I was talking to last week, this CEO is in construction business, and he told me very clearly, Arun, when I have to build something phenomenal in India, I'm not looking at the players in India. I'm looking at players which are great in real estate, say in Dubai. And if some of you had a chance to visit Dubai or have seen those pictures about Dubai, the real estate there is mind-boggling, right? Many of that is half empty, many of that is funded from a variety of reasons. It could be anything, but as a real estate builder, this person's job is to build those iconic buildings. And this person says that what I'm trying to bring in here is what those people are doing in Middle East and trying to bring that business model here. Now, this person might be a little ahead of the game, no two ways about it. But that thinking, that conviction is to go that far and bring it here. So that's the whole summary I would like to kind of, share with people here. Yeah, sure. So I'll take a little pause. Any quick observation or we are okay to move along? Is the pace okay? Perfect. I hope no response is good here, right? Perfect. No news is good news. That's what we say typically in our management, right? So I think now the question is when we talked about transformation, right? We talked about you have to really revamp your team. You have to really what should I say? Completely change the game here, right? And I'll share a story first before I got into anything. So one of the startup where I play a role of a mentor, and I also invested some money. Okay, and happy to ping if somebody pings me separately, talk about it. Now this person's company has been acquired by the biggest daddy we have in India now, right? And if you guys anyone could afford to buy a share of Reliance, if you don't have it, you're missing out on something, right? So this friend's company has been acquired by Reliance, and he's someone who has been my close friend for 10 odd years, and I've been kind of advising the startup from day zero. Today is acquired by Reliance. Now, one year plus in Reliance kind of fold, and he's kind of figuring out I'm not getting that kind of support, or rather the air time. I'll not use the word support because being acquired by the Reliance is a fantastic thing, getting all the right contracts, all the right money, but he kind of felt that I'm not getting that kind of what should I say airtime with the big boys who met in Reliance, and which means the family, right? Just to give that out, and the response he got was because what he's talking about is typically a growth which is, I would say, maybe the double max in 2 years, a 40% growth or 50% growth, right? Many of the businesses that we really see around us, they grow by 8%, 10% maximum. Few of the businesses grow 20%, right? And in a B school, you can go and figure out, banks operate in a margin of 6 to 8%. A retail companies operate a margin of 4 to 5%, right? So many automotive more possibly around 10 to 12, right? So many of these things that we see around us so frequently, they don't operate with that big a margin. And he felt that, giving a revenue of a 40% growth is phenomenal. But the response he got was, Arun, this friend Mike got was that 40% is not sufficient. If you don't double or triple every year, it's very likely that you might be hived off from that big group. Now, back to the example, he and I again were talking about this. How do we change? How do we talk about X to 10X in 3 years? And what we should do? Again, I had, then he asked me to come and have a meeting with his leadership team. And he and I ran a half-day session on multiple things. But the typical thing which I put up there, and I'm just put here, is that, how to lead when normal rules don't apply, which is nothing but the transformation, which is nothing but the exponential growth we're talking about. It's very, very fundamental for us to really think through, how to really become that visionary, how to really take those risks that people feel to differentiate you when it comes to matter on a complex problem, right? So there are a few thoughts from my end here, and again, there is no right or wrong, and this is something which I've been telling a lot of people, be it your organizations and be it your clients, or be some of my friends who run those massive startups. And that's a collection of things that I'll share, and you may take it, you may leave it. It's all up to you. But this is something which I really feel very, very close to my heart. So I'm just sharing those things with you. Yeah. So first and foremost comes as, first your purpose. Are you leading your firm with a very clear purpose? That you are into it for what reason? It's not about what you do, right? It's always about how you do it and why you're doing it that way. So to be more simplistic, it says that I may have a certain way in terms of what I'm talking today. Yeah, a lot of time we get this message from people in all our conversation, and we also do the same. You know, in KPMG, with all this challenge happening for last 5-6 months, we are getting a lot of discussions from various B school prof, where all of leaders are being told about uh, trainings in the platform or in under the ambit of subject called pause for perspective, which says that before you take any action, just take a little pause. And many of these trainings are done to us by senior prof from MIT, from Harvard, from Kellogg's, from ISBs of the world, right? And what they're also telling, okay. And when I go into that session, first thing I ask about, can I get the slide? Just slide कैसे मिलेगी? Because we always feel in our mind, slide मिलेगी तो मैं सीख लूँगा. It's not about that. If you really listen and really think about how did you feel when that discussion was happening, did you manage to capture 2 or 3 aha moment? Did you manage to capture 2 or 3 things which resonated with you? Yeah. Just hold on for a second. Yeah, that's very important. So I think that is where people have to be absolutely critical in terms of how do you make your team feel. And the biggest thing here, okay, which I strongly believe when you talk about running a startup, is really trusting, building that trust in your team, and inspiring their trust in your team, because you don't really build a team. You don't have a big brand to talk through. The people who come on board, who trusted you initially, they are your truest companion, right? And recently somebody would have seen around, Zomato, Dipendra has named the one of the other guys as a co-founder. Now there was a big debate about could this guy be a co-founder, because company is already there, he was only CEO. But that trust between them, and maybe he wanted to give that level of comfort or give that level of confidence to the larger team, saying that somebody who has been part of this whole setup is playing such a critical role that I don't mind elevating someone even beyond a CEO, because what is beyond a CEO, right? So that's very important. The other thing which I feel is that when you talk about purpose-driven leadership, is about what impact we are talking here. So how do we translate purpose to impact? And one of the organization which has really mastered it, okay, and I would really urge everyone to read through about it, is Unilever. Globally, Unilever ran a program called Purpose to Impact, P2I, and many of those case studies are readily available, saying that yes, we are into this FMCG business, but we are creating a lot of impact in people's life, right? And those particular transformation, those particular pivot have been phenomenal in Unilever's continuous growth, and they are always being present in anything or everything that we are sitting around even today. Whether we are having some kind of a tea or a coffee, some kind of a biscuit, snacks, noodles, doing our laundries, anything in our washrooms in terms of taking shower, or their products are kind of omnipresent, right? So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that when you have to lead with transformation mindset, it's very important for you to be absolutely clear about what's your purpose, and are you in a situation to tell the purpose to the larger team, which is absolutely clear in my head. Second thing I would say, and this is quite an interesting one, right? People talked about, do I have an idea? How do I innovate? All that thing is great, but I think the bigger challenge which we all face is we don't learn from failure, right? And the other big thing, if I could just mention here and being open about it, I've not seen people who admit that they have failed, right? And just a slight kind of correlation, and maybe somebody could possibly relate to it. When I talked about myself earlier, I did not say that I was working on a startup where we put the idea it is being successfully run today. I said I have experience of a failed startup. It's saying that yes, we may have failures, but did we learn from it? So innovation muscle, all those things are great when we talk about how to build a muscle, how to make sure people are really put into a zone where they really think out of the box. All those things are fantastic, great. But I think where a lot of time people really struggle is that they don't really allow people to fail. Because if you don't allow me to fail, I will comply to the norms. If I comply to the norms, I will never be a successful person. Or rather, I will never be able to innovate. It's very, very important. And experimentation is nothing but the idea of innovation with new approaches, right? Many of us would have seen at least the I would say, the chemistry students, when all of us have, at least in my time, when we went to the chemistry lab, there was always an urge to mix different chemicals and see the fumes coming out. And if the tubes could kind of blast, wow, we had a day, right? You always wanted to experiment, you always wanted to learn what will go wrong, why it will go wrong. And somewhere our mind is attuned as a child. And I'm sure somebody would have seen that also when somebody tells you, or when you tell a child, please don't do this. The curiosity of the child always says, yes, I want to do this. At least I want to try it out. But as the child grows into a student, then into an adult, or into a college student, then into an adult in professional life, we are rewarded to comply with the norms. And that's the biggest, I'll not say flaw, but that's the biggest realization at least I have had when it comes to why people are not able to innovate. Because we get so much fixed in our mindset. And, if I just share one of the example, I was talking about this program about Wokhart Innovation School of Courage, and I'll just share that, in a while as well about the program. So there, Professor Mashelkar, I think he's possible, and he's someone who's been asked about by multiple organizations to drive innovation, and he told us about how to build innovation muscle. And Professor Mashelkar is someone who's advisor to, our Mani Group, Tata Group, many other groups, and even including our Honorable Prime Minister about how to build the innovation within the organization or within the country, how to build the innovation as the decora. He shared one very interesting anecdote, and I'm quoting that with that liberty. He's saying that, in one of the meetings he was having with Ratan Tata and along with his CEO, and they deliberated a lot on innovation. And I think the only takeaway I had from that conversation is he said that towards the break, Ratan asked me that why we are not able to innovate as much as a group in Tata than others or other global brands. The only answer he gave was that because, Ratan, you don't have a platform where people are allowed to fail and given that commitment or given that reward. In our Indian ecosystem, we are not allowed to fail. And that's where we try to hide the failures. That's where we try to follow the norms. And that's where the innovation could have a challenge. Now, it may sound pretty basic, but I'm sure if you start linking, your childhood, you're thinking about recent of whatever new thing you're trying to do, we stop doing where we feel we will be caught up off guard. We have stopped doing things which are not great for us to deliver and do the job. Now, I'll share a very interesting anecdote also here is that 2-3 months back, I was talking to one of the, as people may be aware, there are many large companies, there are many large companies here which talk about, which run from India, but they kind of services the globe in terms of their parent company. You would have seen bigger offices of, RBS, HSBC, or, many other people. Now, in that construct, I was talking to one of those large companies, and their India had told me very important perspective, saying that we talked about innovation a lot. And this person said, Arun, the challenge that I'm facing, and, I would just open up for that the deliberation here is the challenge we are facing is we have been rewarded up till now to comply with the norm, because all these global companies, they are given different SLAs, like service level agreement, how many invoices to process in a day, how many new reports to be made, how to make sure your receivables are in the order or payables are in the order. So everything you have been rewarded all your life to run the process to the T, to perform on the SLAs. Now you're telling me to innovate, which is very different. I have lost that muscle of thinking new things because I have been rewarded always on delivering the specs, right? So it's very, very important for us to think through when we are chasing someone, when we are asking someone to innovate, it's not that easy, right? And just to share one perspective here from my side, people may ask about how do you really bring innovation? So first and foremost is how to build the right intellectual curiosity in the mind. How can you allow people to think about 20 things? We all may have heard this story about, can you sell me a pen? Give me 20 reasons you can sell me a pen, right? So it could be very different questions about anything and everything. Once you start asking, once you start reading more, you can build those curiosity to start with mind. At a corporate level, at an organizational level, we have been taken to certain experience centers to really imagine things. So from Accenture days, I could share with you, Accenture has a massive innovation center facility, innovation hub, they call it, in Bangalore, where you could stand and feel that you are now with virtual reality, it is possible. But even 4 years back, I'm talking about here, where we could go and actually feel that we are standing in Melbourne cricket ground and facing Bradley bowling while we are in the middle of MCG. So they put those VR goggles to you, and they make you feel that you are standing in the middle of MCG. Now that kind of virtualization possibility, when we shared with some of the leading Indian companies, it helped them to think about how can virtualization be playing an important role in a large capital projects of building a steel plant, or while they are doing excavation, more from a security standpoint, right? So these things really, really are helpful when you start looking into it. But to build that intellectual muscle or innovation muscle, you have to provide that kind of environment. So I would say that one of the key takeaway in my mind today is whatever we are doing from a startup standpoint, it's important to understand how are you giving allowance or capability to your team to innovate. Are you really celebrating failures also as you celebrate success? But celebrating failures here is about learning from those failures. Yeah. So that's something I believe is very, very important and fundamental from innovation standpoint. Yeah, and I think the other thing which I want to also call out, which is very, 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 very important, is authentic leadership. The leader has to be authentic. Never ever it's been more genuine than nowadays. Wherein it's not about I want to be a lead just because of everybody around me is a leader. I don't have to start a startup just to be kind of been very fancy man putting a founder tag in front of me on my profile, right? But important element is when you talk about authentic leadership is how do you really convey those right stories? How do you really convey with the messaging with your team? Because it's important that your team buys in who you are rather than what you project, right? And it's very, very important to be authentic. Is everybody has gone through that path, right? Giving that comfort, giving that space to your team where they build the right kind of respect, and you share also your challenges and issues. It's very, very important to build that kind of environment where there's a mutual respect and mutual trust when it comes to having those issues and challenges. Because leadership doesn't mean that anytime you come to me, I'll solve your problem, right? So never ever we're talking about that shining knight of armor who can solve each and every problem, or that Robin Hood, or that any of the star people may have in their mind, right? That authentic leadership is based on actual scenarios, thinking about real problems, not about always telling I have all the solutions. Yeah. The other thing which I want definitely people to really think about it here, and I have seen in my experience. I think I had a luxury of my initial 10 years. I spent around 7 years abroad. Okay, in India, we really, really struggle to have difficult conversation. Right? People always talk about simple thing when they are in the room, but back to each other when the person is not there, we really bring up the real points. I have seen multiple times, be in any office, be wherever I've worked, those names have been shared by Prof earlier about firms like Accenture and now with KPMG. I've seen many serious conversation in the boardroom. People are not really willing to address who's the elephant in the room. You just can't have a difficult conversation. And if you're not able to have a difficult conversation, trust me, you will never ever be able to solve the problem. Then only you are just pushing it or brushing it under the carpet. So it's very, very important for you to kind of, in whatever setup you are, if you're talking about driving a transformation and thinking from that mindset, is how to really have difficult conversation. And the art for that is very simple. Do you really listen? Do you really provide the genuine attention, right? Are you really neutral? Are you really, kind of devoid of any biases, right? And having this conversation early is much more important than not having it at all for the mutual benefit. But I think important element, again, the second thing which I believe India as a culture really lack, because we are a very high touch contextual culture, right? We don't listen much, right? And you can see that, right? Forget about the webinars, right? But if you look at your friend circle, I think one of the other things which I tell people is, can you just be with any of your friend, family, spouse, your prof, may not be prof is the right thing, but with your customer, can you just listen for 10 minutes without really making any impression, just listening, without trying to punt in and give your point of view. So listening, reflecting and observing is an amazing, amazing skill as something that I would like everyone to kind of think through deep in their heart at how you're doing it. If you're not doing it, why you're not doing it. Practice it is essentially very, very important for you to drive phenomenal effort in any of the tough projects or tough engagement. That's my sense. The last thing which I really want to spend some time on, which I believe it's set enough in the current scenario and everybody is aware of it, right? The resilience. And as I heard recently, is called term called anti-fragile, which means that things will not, given a lot of pressure, a lot of challenge, the things will not break. It's anti-fragile, it will not break, it will grow stronger. And I think the critical answer to that would be any of the muscle that we use for exercise, whether it comes to running or gymming or cycling, we really put stress on certain muscles. And those muscles rebound and they come back and they grow further stronger. So what we're talking about is, even though there's a lot of stress, it's very, very important for us to always think about where's the opportunity, right? If I speak for the farm, nowadays it's very evident, right? There are certain kind of industries which are not giving us the opportunity to think about to get the new business. Now we are talking about which industry will be more relevant and how do we become relevant. So it's very, very important for us to maintain that optimistic outlook all the time. By optimistic outlook, I'm not saying that just think about, मेरे 15 लाख आएंगे और account में आ जाएंगे, right? I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that in your practical sphere, are you able to identify the opportunities, right? So this friend of mine whose company got bought by Reliance, right? While we were talking about helping him build it, we struggle to earn, as any startup struggle, about the good business idea or about the good business funding. But we kept on kind of identifying what will enable to get those fundings in. And after getting one or two right kind of platform where the endorsement happened from some serious big names into the startup or VC world, the things will start coming in. And I'm sure you can easily Google and figure it out how many conversations it take to Larry Page and Sergey Brin before they got the funding for Google. I think it's a 220 or 240th conversation they did before they got funding for their product, which is Google, that everybody else uses it today. Almost everybody uses it today, right? Had they stayed at 199 or 218, we may not be using Google today, right? So it will never be easy. It will never be hunky-dory, right? You have to really build that kind of thinking and that muscle to stay through the game. So one of the other things which I tell people, at least folks who come to me for their startup advice, is if you are thinking about doing a startup for 2 years, just increase it by 50%, right? Maybe simple, or just like they say, any of your marriage expense, any of your expense you're thinking about building or reconstructing a house, or even when you're going on a vacation, whatever you plan, you end up spending 30-40% over it. Similarly, I'm saying, while you're talking about, okay, I have to talk about building a startup, put in an hour, put in a time. If you increase it by a year, things could have been different. Now, going back to my example, while I was in UK, build a startup, had I stayed back for 1 year extra after my 2 years on building on that startup, things could have been different. Now, yes, ifs and buts will always be there, but I think what I'm talking about is having that optimistic outlook that whenever you feel enough time has been spent, can you really give 6 months more? Okay, can you really be optimistic to give 6 months with the same rigor and same passion and continue to be there to make things work when you really feel all the hope is lost, right? So that is for me resilience. The thing which I would like to kind of call out, I'm sure many of you would have had read it by now or heard about this, the growth mindset. It's very, very essential for us to understand, right? I think especially in an Indian kind of a construct, and thankfully this NEP policy, I'm sure many of you would have gone through, especially in the academic field, may have got a better chance to look through that than me, right? Like earlier it was, we got so many numbers to be in science, or maybe choose either between science, like non-medical or medical, right? Always there was a fixed mindset in our parents, and primarily because we came from that scarcity time frame. India got independent, we were poor, and all that stuff, all that history and geography, all of us are well aware of. But what happened in there is that we became with a very, I'll say, a lot of people whom I come across, and they may be coming with such a huge background. It's like people get fixed in terms of what they can or they cannot do. They kind of stuck there. But in a growth mindset, and there's amazing talks by Carol Dweck, who is a lead professor on this or researcher on this, saying that you know while we go into a growth mindset, while we see every opportunity is there to grow, where we see challenges will only help me to grow. I don't shy away from the challenges. I take feedback. So a lot of projects I do in transformation, I tell people always resistance is good. When somebody tells me that this person did not like this idea around I'm getting a lot of resistance, I say that resistance is good. So how do you train your mind? How do you really try to see the other side of it? I think it's very, very important from a growth mindset perspective. And I'll strongly urge everyone to, if we are talking about startup, if we're talking about idea, if you're talking about innovation, one of the things, if you have not read about it, not worked on it, you should really, really think about growth mindset. And I'm happy to have a further deliberation on it and talk about in more detail, just conscious of time. But this is something I would really urge everyone to really think through, that what kind of bias you had. For example, I always had this bias that, I don't have a right side of brain, which is a creativity aspect. And I struggle to draw. I struggle to make anything which is artistic. I just can't put a foot on the dance floor. But 4 years, 5 years back, while Accenture started its Accenture strategy practice, and I was selected as one of the early practitioners from India team, we were having this training session in Chicago, and there we had this prof, and he has a lot of videos on the TED as well. It says that anybody can draw, and believe you me, he helped us understand anybody can do the sketching. And I used to feel my drawing is really poor, but this person shared some technique in a 15 minutes or 14 minutes. There's a TED Talk video which talks about anybody can draw. Okay, anybody can sketch or anybody can draw. And my mind completely opened up after that, because I always used to feel I was stuck in that fixed mindset kind of syndrome where I just can't draw. I used to have this kind of a challenge, right? So just sharing this story with you so that it kind of comes to term with. But it's very, very important for us to have this view. The last thing which I would like to end up, right? When we talk about entrepreneur or startup, dilemmas that will always you will struggle. And I've seen my friends, I've seen myself struggling with that. Whenever I see in those pictures, is always about, the moment you talk about building a farm, the moment you talk about taking money from others, there's always the dilemma, what's between founder versus investor interest. And that's a classic debate, right? The way founder's vision is versus, the way you see investor interest, there could be two different things. And that dilemma is always tough to solve, right? The jury is still not out on what happened with the Mr. Mistry versus Tata, right? Versus Tata Sons. But it kind of played out where Mistry as a professional had a very different ways in terms of he wanted to run Tata Group. But Tata Group, whatever legacy it had, and it's been phenomenal. I worked there. I have possibly utmost respect for Tata Group than any other group in India. But that kind of never gelled well, right? The other thing is, which is always there, is how do you really draw the line that you are owner versus you are managing the team? It's always a key critical debate, because if you continue to be owner, if you are not able to make your team the owner, they will always report status to you, right? And one of the classic tricks somebody told me is to get to that level where if you are getting too many calls. A lot of time I used to give this complaint to some of my seniors saying that I didn't get time to work because there were too many calls. Now, then he asked me this simple point that I don't start making those notes on why you get so many calls. Are these really required, or people were giving you only the status update? If people are giving you status update, then you are not giving them ownership. You want to hear status update, they are telling you status update, right? You are a lot of time getting on the calls to just address or understand the status. People are only apprising you, hey boss, I'm working. Whereas if you really help them to be owner, then they will not come to you for status update, they'll come to you with action, they come to you with outcome, right? And this again comes back to, the challenge of delegation versus control, how much you delegate versus how much control you would like to have. Entrepreneurs really, really struggle with that. And then the last point, which definitely I want to highlight here is that, each startup grows through a certain phase. We talk about certain kind of a rapid, certain kind of a growth before you can say, yes, this business model is successful. But then the challenge comes again, do you want to run with that high pace, or do you want to go a little slow, but get things in order to run it more like a company? So these are few dilemmas from my experience and, working with many firms and looking at it closely with some of my friends. When it comes to transformation, people have to really take a note of this. So with that, I kind of, take a pause here. Happy to take any questions, but, anything specific that you want me to elaborate, happy to share. More importantly, any feedback, any questions, Prof and the team, I'm happy to hear.
Not any dilemma, sir. From your experience, we are actually enlightening ourselves that how to go ahead with our own startups, how to mentor our own startups. Thank you, sir. I open it now for our attendees. If they have any question, please either they can ask and unmuting themselves, or they can also write their questions in the chat box, please. Sir has very rightly explained actually the concept of corporate entrepreneurship. That means where you give people choice to do their own, means they can also have something on their innovative risk, so that they can also go for some innovative product or innovative process by their own. Sir, one question is there from Arjun Raj in the chat box. Sir, Arjun Raj is also my incubator from Kerala.
Oh, very nice. I mean, either making a prescription card and reader, but our Honorable Minister announced a digital health mission as same as my project. It is a subscription-based business project. Is there any problem with making something same? Again, I'm telling you from my limited experience, right? What government or Prime Minister announced is something very, very big and amazingly transformative. Now, these health records were always available in US or in any of the developed countries, right? Now, trying to bring that to India is a massive, massive scale problem in itself. Now, if Arjun, if I were you, if I have to make a prescription card, I'll possibly not wait for that long, but I could always define my target market. I could look into where I am and where are these people who are really, really needing this and can really start thinking about implementing it very quickly. I'll not delay or worry about this thing that Indian government is doing it. But if you really believe, again, it's a conviction that you have in your idea. If you can do it in a short sample size, maybe possibly target a very clear customer segment, I think, or a patient segment here. It seems really important to me. And what I understand, some of these companies like Pharmacy, or all these firms are also talking about where for each patient they kind of start taking care of their prescription. They note about when the replenishment needs to happen, and they provide those services. So all I'm talking about is, yes, there's a lot of work which is happening in this, but something that you really, really need to move fast and do with a sizable market and population without worrying too much about what the government would do. Because if you have an idea, at the best, if you really do it well, even if you fail, you still have a lot of learning from this. That's my sense of it, right? I always err on the side of risk rather than not taking a risk. That's me as an individual.
And Arjun, apart from that, in the mentoring session series number 7, we are also going to invite a person who will especially talk about health information system. right? So there also, if you want, you can put this question. Yeah. Any other question, please?
And you don't need to type, you can unmute and just share openly, right? I know.
Please feel free to unmute yourself and put your questions.
Thank you. So any thoughts? Anybody like to unmute and share anything from the session that resonated with them, or how do we go about it, sir? I just have one slide if I have 2 minutes to share with people. But I wanted to just hear if there's any more question. Sure. So people, I just want to share this, right? This is just my template. I talk to a lot of people when we tell folks, thanks, Sarika ji. When I talk to them that, build new habits, what is transformation, what do you really want to do, it's a simple takeaway from my end. I would strongly urge everyone to just give it a thought that, to accomplish anything, right? What do you really want to do, by when? Where do you see the barriers? And what support you need from whom? But what is more important is having this mindset of start, stop, and continue, right? If you just anything that you want to do, any specific thing, for example, Arjun raised a point about medical prescription card, right? So what do you really need to start? By when? Where do you see the barrier, right? If you start putting in this, what you already have done, what you need to continue. Maybe you need to continue to build a relationship. You need to continue to talk to some of the doctors or medical professionals. You need to think about building a pilot of this. Can you make a small app which could be very helpful? There are multiple, health information system which are available now in the country, right? So just getting to details of it, but this template has always been successful whenever I want to build a new habit. And you can just keep it on your desk. You can just note it down, share it with someone who could be your good reviewer or good confidant who can give you right feedback. But important element is if you start thinking like that, it helps you to build a new habit, right? So this is where something I talked about. So I thought I'll just share. I use that. I see there are a few chats here. Let me just open that. Oh, great. Thanks a lot for all the encouragement. I'm very pleased to hear this. Makes my Sunday even better. Sunday evening.
Thank you. Better. Thanks, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So, thanks, sir, any final comment, or we could just wrap up? I know it's 10 minutes from the time scheduled, but.
Yeah, sir, we can wrap up now. But sir, thanks a lot, sir. You actually shared your experience and everything, sir, what you talked about. It is also there, always there in my mind. I can summarize it that listening is one thing, that then after and try to understand other person, what other person is saying. Maybe he is having some other innovative idea in the process or in the product, so that you can also be benefited. Actually, sir, it is the innovation is not only one man's cup. It is basically the teamwork. And unless your team is not open to you, you are not ready to listen to them. And this team comprises of not only the team, basically all the stakeholders, where customers are also there, sir, your investors are also there. So you will have to be a very good leadership, where then after you will be able to have a complete transformation as per the requirement of the coming timing. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thanks a lot. No, my pleasure. My pleasure. And I think recently we heard India has got into the top 50 in some innovation
48 index. Rank. 48th rank of the Global Innovation Index. Sir.
Yeah, and I would say that Professor Mashilkar 2 years back, while we were doing this program for Work Hard, he shared that rank. I was not aware of this, some kind of rank like this exists. We always knew Sweden, Denmark, some of the Scandinavian countries are at the top, or US, Germany are ahead or Japan are ahead. But these things are quite motivating and great to read and kind of reflect on. And I think I would say that the best teacher for me always has been nature.
Thanks.
Right? That's where when I started about this example about transformation. So I'm not using anything else. I'm not talking about the other thing which I'll take maybe a minute just to kind of complete the thread here, right? If we see the global trend, and I'm sure many of you would have seen, right? The global trend, go to 2010 and see which were the top companies in the world, and see today's which are those companies. The companies have changed. Where is GE today? Where is Total? Where is Shell? Right? The asset light is the model. The digital is the model. Being the time, space, taking the time and space of customer is the model, which is your Facebook. Like, what does Facebook take from you? It takes your time. People don't get it. You don't give anything else. People say Facebook is free. I said, no, it's not free. It takes 30 minutes of your time. If you're trying to post something, once you post, then you want to check it again. The number of logins we are doing, we are paying back to Facebook, right? We are not, what should I say, free user of the Facebook. We are actually adding to the database.
Thanks.
Right? So that's one thing. And if you look at, that's where I quite like, whatever people may say, the whole transformation in Reliance Prime in the last 3 years, since the Jio has come up, is precisely the same. They realize that we can't be only running a petrochem business. So they are doing petrochem, they are doing media, they're doing many other things, but everything now anchored around digital. Because in India, even if you count the mobile users, you look at that number, it's kind of mind-boggling number, 800 million people, right? So anyway, that's just some interesting thought. But I always want to relate to the nature first. That's where I said, look at the butterfly. If at all you have to read anything, talk about it. I really urge people to read about that story again, and it's quite fascinating. Yeah, happy to be part of it. I'm glad that all of you have given us time.
Sir, on behalf of all the audience
I'll be in touch.
also.
Yeah, I'd like to meet up.
Yeah, on the behalf of all the attendees also, sir. Thanks a lot.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.